Hello everybody, I am Verum, your host for today, and today I will be going into Repo's lore. Repo doesn't have straight storytelling as many games may have, but instead it's got environmental storytelling, which is a lot harder to depict, but it means your theories will be a bit more precise. Now, for this video, I will be going into many things people haven't mentioned, such as the dates of when each location was first made, when the virus presumably broke out, what the year is when we played the game, and I will end off talking about Mr. Headman and how he is important to the story. So make sure you stay until the end to find out, but just remember this is just a theory, but let's not waste any more time and begin with when the locations were first made. So let's first begin with when each location was first made. In Headman Manor, we can find multiple hints that suggest that it was first made in the 1950s. When you roam around the map, you can find that on the ceiling there are candles, which suggest it was mid-1900s because of the lack of newer technology. Not saying there wasn't any, because you can find clocks, televisions, and also small lamps. And one thing all these items have in common is that the design is very similar to those made in the 1950s. But there is one item I can get an exact model for: the fridge. The fridge is a Big Chill retro original, first being made in the 1940s. So with that, I believe that there is enough evidence to suggest the 1950s. Next, let's talk about Swiftbroom Academy. From the name, you can tell it was an academy for teaching magic, and you can find classrooms but also bedrooms around the place. There isn't much suggesting when it was first made, but the design of the building is very old, similar to the Headman Manor design. So we've already got a clue of when it was roughly built, but when you check for when black magic was getting popular, it was around the late 1950s. You can also tell the academy stayed for many years after, because the class of 87 seems to have been the last class to graduate when it was abandoned. Which pushes us into our next map, McJannick's Station. This map seems to be a research facility that is researching a cure for something, as seen from all the samples we collect. This is presumably a cure to a disease that has wiped out majority of humanity, as seen from the state of the shop section's exterior and the skeletons around the place. When you look into the items used in this facility, you can see many items are old and used in the early 2000s. However, the fridge design is the same as the Headman Manor, so they still use technology over half a century old. Now, there is also a calendar that says 2097, April 15th, but when you look into it, you can see it has 35 days in it. But that doesn't mean it was made in 2097. Rather, that just means it was the final day the bunker was used. But let's now go on to the next topic, that being when the virus first broke out. So before we talk about when, let's talk about why it's a virus and how it could have potentially started. Firstly, as mentioned earlier, there seems to be a research facility looking into a cure, and cures are normally for diseases. But we also know that this disease has wiped out almost all of humanity, excluding the Huntsman, but I'll probably go into his lore a bit when Update 1 releases. So this disease seems to stem from Swiftbrook Academy. When you look at the design of the laser creature's beam, his beam matches up with the wizard's wand. Now, these creatures seem to be repossessed humans who have been taken as prisoners and transformed through magic. Why? Well, when you look at the animal, he almost looks like multiple human parts stitched together. The Rugrat looks like deformed babies, and the Upscream seems to have a human skull involved, same with the Trudge. And in Headman Manor, you can find statues of the Rugrats as slaves, so I believe that the Chef Frog and the Rugrat were sold as slaves to the Headman Manor for a bit of extra cash on Swiftbrook Academy side. Next, the virus started because the headmaster may have put in the wrong spell on these creatures. Maybe it was on the Headman, who was dead and was attempted to be reborn because of his status, but when he was reborn, he had a new virus that may have triggered the monsters into becoming vicious creatures. Now, I believe the virus started in 1988 due to the class of 87 graduating before it was abandoned, and the facility seems to have been made around a decade after, which lines up with how long it would have taken to make such a large underground facility to hide from the disease. And also the fact it was made in Greenland, as seen by the sign, but it's also snowing outside, which is common in Greenland. Many people believe it happens in Denmark because of the flag around the place, but it seems more likely Denmark was where it started due to the academy and Headman Manor being in the pine forest, which is common in Denmark. But let's next move on to when the game was most likely taking place. There aren't many clues throughout the game that suggest when the game takes place, except for the 2097 calendar. But if we move into the tutorial world, you can find the active safety for AI workers being established in 2184. This means that the robots we play as are set up to start working in 2184. Now that's the earliest date that we can possibly play as, or it could have been many hundreds of years after. But that's all we know about the date. However, this does mean that the robots could have been out before but got destroyed. But if they're getting an active safety published, then that means there's some sort of human morals being played here. And we can take a look at the names. Semi-bots, that's what they're called. I've heard people say that the bots are controlled by humans, hence semi-bot, but I think it's more possible the robots are possessed by humans that used to work as the same kind of workers as seen from the bodies lying around the place. And that's all of the dates that we can possibly sum up from this info in the pre-release. So let's move on to the final topic of today, the Headman. The Headman is most intriguing in the lore because he has a whole place dedicated to him, but also the fact he was the first monster planned, even going back to the original version of the game when it was just a cleaning game. So what's so special about the Headman? Well, I want to point out something that people haven't said yet, and that is the Taxman. The Taxman, when you look at the two designs, both have large heads, but one's an AI and one's real and zombie looking. But look at their eyes and teeth. They're both fleshy and off-putting, and my thesis is that the Headman is the Taxman. Yes, I said that, yes, it could be 100% wrong, but I want to spread the awareness to it because it's possible the Headman could have been turned into an AI before he somehow died. We already know the Taxman is a very high intellectual AI, which could have perhaps mimicked the Headman, but we know there is something important between these two characters because they're both presented as the main antagonists of the game. But we also know the Headman is the only character that is a human in the story because of his gravestone in the manor. But we know he's important at the beginning of the virus because of the Rugrats statues, which link up to the academy. And I also want to point out that the developers of the game have showed us footage of the new map, the museum. So far my idea is that this museum is owned by the Headman due to the museum relics all around the manor, but also because it lines up with the narrative of how he earned enough money to buy such a large manor. But that is to be proven right or wrong when update 1 releases. And I know this is my first lore video and it's less edited than my normal videos, but I'm doing this as a fun project for this month, so if you liked what you saw or heard today, then consider liking and subscribing, but also share this video to spread the awareness of the lore. And as of writing, update 1 is still not out, but I'll maybe return with a lore video when it does drop. But anyways, that is all from me and I'll see you guys all later. Goodbye.